December 12, 2024, Amy Schumer posted a photo on the New York subway and ended her marriage in the same breath. But it wasn't the divorce that shocked people. It was what she admitted about her body, her husband, and the real reason behind it all. Everyone thought they knew why Amy Schumer's marriage ended. They were all wrong. What she just admitted about losing 50 pounds and Fischer reveals the shocking truth. Hollywood tried to hide. The photo itself seemed almost ordinary at first glance. Amy, her husband Fischer, and their young son Gene riding the New York City subway like any other family. 3 people caught in a moment that looked casual, unremarkable even. But the caption that accompanied it would send shockwaves through Hollywood and spark a conversation that went far beyond celebrity gossip. Amy Schumer has never been one to follow the script. Throughout her career, she's built her reputation on saying the things other people only think, on breaking the fourth wall between celebrity and audience, on calling out the absurdities of fame, beauty standards, and the impossible expectations placed on women in the public eye. But even by her standards, this announcement was different. The post started conventionally enough, the usual language of celebrity divorce statements, the difficult decision, the mutual love and respect, the focus on their child, the request for privacy, standard procedure for a Hollywood split. But then Amy did something unprecedented. She went off script in a way that revealed far more than the divorce itself. She wrote about her weight loss, not in the way you'd expect, not as a celebration or a transformation story. She explicitly stated what the divorce was not about. It wasn't because she had dropped some pounds and thought she could do better. And it wasn't because Chris, a hot James Beard award-winning chef, could still attract other women. She laid it all out there, anticipating the narrative before it could even form, shutting down the speculation before it could begin. And in doing so, she exposed something far more significant than the end of her marriage. She revealed the impossible position women find themselves in when their bodies change and their lives shift. She called out the cultural obsession that treats a woman's weight as the explanation for everything that happens to her. She preemptively defended herself against an accusation that hadn't even been made yet because she knew it was coming. Because she knew that in our culture, when a woman loses weight and gets divorced, those two facts become causally linked in the public imagination. The story writes itself. Woman loses weight, gains confidence, leaves husband, starts new life. It's a narrative so ingrained, so reflexive, that Amy felt compelled to address it in the very announcement of her divorce. But here's what makes this story even more complicated. Amy's weight loss wasn't about vanity or self-improvement or gaining confidence. It was about survival. And understanding that journey is essential to understanding why this divorce announcement landed the way it did. Let's rewind to earlier in 2024, because the story of this marriage ending actually begins with Amy's body betraying her in ways that had nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with pain. For months, Amy had been dealing with serious health issues that were affecting every aspect of her life. She was experiencing symptoms that were debilitating, confusing, and deeply frightening, the kind of health problems that don't make for glamorous Instagram posts or inspirational transformation stories, the kind that make you wonder if you'll ever feel normal again. Amy was eventually diagnosed with Cushing syndrome, a disorder caused by prolonged exposure to high levels of cortisol. It's not a condition that gets talked about much in celebrity news cycles. It's not sexy or relatable or easy to package into a headline, but it's serious. It affects everything from your mood to your immune system to your physical appearance. It causes weight gain, muscle weakness, and a host of other symptoms that can make daily life feel impossible. She was also dealing with endometriosis, a painful condition where tissue similar to the lining of the uterus grows outside the uterus, another condition that's often minimized or dismissed, particularly in women. Another source of chronic pain that doesn't fit neatly into the narratives we tell about women's bodies and their worth. The treatment for these conditions, the medical interventions that would allow Amy to function without constant pain, resulted in significant weight loss, about 50 pounds total, not from diet culture or personal training or any of the methods we typically associate with celebrity transformations, from treating serious medical conditions that were making her life unbearable. And yet, when people saw the results, when they noticed that Amy looked different, the assumptions began. The comments started rolling in, the speculation about what this meant for her confidence, her career, her relationships. Because we've been conditioned to see weight loss as inherently positive, as a sign of discipline or self-improvement or newfound happiness, regardless of the circumstances that caused it. Amy had already addressed this earlier in the year. In a previous Instagram post on December 1st, she'd written explicitly that whatever ended up happening with her and Chris had nothing to do with weight loss or autism. She'd said fingers crossed they'd make it through, calling Chris the best. Even then, she was trying to separate her medical journey from her marriage, trying to prevent people from drawing connections that didn't exist. But clearly, those fingers crossed weren't enough, and when the divorce became official, she knew exactly what narrative would emerge if she didn't address it head-on. Now let's talk about Chris Fischer, because he's been largely out of the spotlight throughout this marriage, and that's been intentional. Chris isn't a celebrity in the traditional sense. He's a celebrated chef, yes, a James Beard Award winner with serious culinary credentials. But he's not someone who sought fame or public attention. In fact, he actively avoided it. Chris was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, something Amy has spoken about publicly with his permission. She's talked about how his autism affects their communication, their daily life, their relationship dynamics. She's been open about the learning curve, the adjustments they both had to make, the ways they navigated a marriage where neurological differences played a significant role. And she's also been clear that she fell in love with him precisely because of who he is, not in spite of it. The way his mind works, his passion for food, his straightforward communication style that left no room for the kind of performative nonsense that often dominates celebrity relationships. They met in 2017 when Amy's personal chef introduced them. Chris had worked at prestigious restaurants, had built a reputation for farm-to-table cooking on Martha's Vineyard, had earned recognition that had nothing to do with Hollywood or fame. He was successful in his own right, in a completely different world from Amy's comedy career. The relationship moved quickly. By February 2018, they were married in a surprise ceremony in Malibu. By May 2019, they welcomed their son, Gene. From the outside, it looked like a whirlwind romance that had resulted in a stable, grounded family life. Amy seemed happier than she'd been in previous relationships, more settled, more at peace. But marriages are complex ecosystems. What works in the early days doesn't always sustain over years of real life, especially when you're navigating serious health issues, raising a young child, maintaining demanding careers, and doing all of it under public scrutiny. The first real public hint that something might be wrong came on November 11, 2024. Amy deleted all the previous photos from her Instagram profile, every single one, including all the photos that featured Chris. The family moments, the couple shots, the casual snapshots of their life together, gone. In their place, a new post with a caption that tried to downplay the significance. She said she'd actually left her house that night, asked who was proud, said she was feeling good and happy, then added almost as an afterthought that she deleted her old pictures for no reason. For no reason. That phrase alone sent alarm bells ringing for anyone who's ever watched a relationship fall apart on social media. Because people don't delete years of memories for no reason. They do it when they're trying to create distance, when they're trying to rewrite their own history, when they're preparing for a new chapter that doesn't include the person they used to share their life with. The speculation intensified immediately, but a source close to the couple told reporters that they were privately working through normal issues that couples in long-term marriages have, and that they were both committed to the relationship. The kind of statement that's meant to be reassuring but often signals that things are more serious than they appear. A week before that Instagram purge, Amy had posted something else interesting. A picture of New York City alongside praise for the Hulu series All's Fair, a show about divorce lawyers. And then she added, almost defensively, that she and Chris were still married. The fact that she felt the need to clarify their marital status at all suggested that questions were already being asked, that rumors were already circulating. Then came the December 1st post, the one where she addressed her health journey in detail and made that pointed statement about her marriage. Whatever happened with her and Chris had nothing to do with weight loss or autism. She was drawing a line, trying to prevent the narrative from forming around those two factors, trying to maintain some control over how her story would be told. But even as she wrote fingers crossed, even as she called him the best, you could sense the uncertainty, the acknowledgement that things were fragile, the recognition that hope alone might not be enough to save what they'd built. The last time anyone saw Amy and Chris together publicly was in June 2024 at a Tribeca Film Festival premiere for a documentary called Room to Move. They attended together, appeared at the industry event as a couple, gave no indication that anything was wrong. But that was 6 months before the divorce announcement. 6 months is a long time in a struggling marriage, long enough for small cracks to become unbridgeable chasms. So what actually happened? What caused a marriage that seemed solid, that produced a child they both clearly love, that weathered autism diagnoses and health crises and public scrutiny to ultimately fail? According to sources close to the couple, there's nothing ugly about the split. It's described as cohesive, amicable, respectful. They've just been finalizing a few things. The kind of language that suggests they've both accepted this outcome, that they're handling it maturely, that there's no dramatic betrayal or explosive conflict driving the separation. And maybe that's the truth. Maybe this is simply a case of two people who loved each other, who built something meaningful together, who gave it their best effort, and ultimately realized they couldn't make it work long term. Not every divorce needs a villain. Not every ending needs to be dramatic or scandalous or filled with blame. But Amy's insistence on clarifying what the divorce is not about reveals something deeper about the pressure women face when their lives change visibly. She felt compelled to defend herself against an assumption that reduces her entire marriage and its dissolution to her physical appearance. To preemptively argue against a narrative that would make her weight loss the central character in this story rather than the complicated human emotions and practical realities that actually end marriages. Think about what that means. Amy is ending a 7-year marriage, navigating co-parenting with a young child, dealing with the emotional fallout of a major life change, and she has to spend part of her divorce announcement managing public perception about her body, explaining that her weight loss didn't make her think she was too good for her husband, explaining that her husband's attractiveness and professional success didn't tempt him away from their marriage. She's addressing criticisms that haven't even been articulated yet, because she knows they're coming, because she's watched how these stories play out, because she understands that in our culture, a woman's body is always the subtext, always the assumed explanation, always the lens through which every other aspect of her life is interpreted. When a woman loses weight and gets divorced, we assume she gained confidence and left. When a woman gains weight during a marriage, we assume her husband lost attraction and left. Either way, her body becomes the story. Her worth, her choices, her entire life narrative gets filtered through the lens of her physical appearance. And whether it meets society's standards, Amy has spent her entire career pushing back against this kind of reductive thinking. Her comedy has always centered on calling out the absurdity of beauty standards, the impossible expectations placed on women, the ways that female bodies are policed and judged and treated as public property. So it makes perfect sense that even in her divorce announcement, she's still fighting that battle, still refusing to let her story be simplified into a weight loss transformation narrative. The irony is devastating. She loses weight because of serious medical conditions that caused her physical pain. She treats those conditions so she can function, so she can be present for her son, so she can work and live without constant suffering. And instead of that being understood as a health journey, it gets interpreted as a beauty transformation. Instead of sympathy for what she's been through physically, there's speculation about how it affected her marriage. This is what happens when we treat women's bodies as more important than their experiences, when we care more about how someone looks than about what they're going through, when we reduce complex life decisions to simple before and after narratives. Amy's divorce announcement is ultimately about reclaiming her own story, about refusing to let others write the script for her life, about drawing boundaries around what her body changes mean and don't mean, about separating her medical reality from her relationship reality, even though she shouldn't have to. The phrase she used, family forever, carries real weight in this context. She and Chris may not be able to sustain a romantic partnership, but they're committed to co-parenting Jean together. They're maintaining respect and love for each other, even as they acknowledge that marriage isn't working for them. They're prioritizing their child's well-being over any bitterness or resentment they might feel. That's actually radical in its own way. Not the divorce itself, but the way they're handling it. The refusal to let it become ugly or contentious. The commitment to preserving what matters, their family unit and their son's security, even as they dismantle the marriage itself. And Amy's public handling of this announcement, as unconventional as it is, reflects the same values. She's being honest without being cruel. She's addressing speculation without feeding drama. She's maintaining her boundaries while still giving her audience enough information to understand what's happening. She's also, whether intentionally or not, opening up a larger conversation about how we talk about women's bodies and women's choices, about the assumptions we make and the narratives we impose, about the way that physical appearance becomes weaponized in discussions of women's worth and women's relationships. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that Amy is forcing us to confront. If she hadn't lost weight, if she'd gotten divorced while still dealing with the physical effects of Cushing syndrome, the narrative would have been equally cruel. People would have speculated that her husband left because of her appearance, that her weight gain made her undesirable, that she let herself go and paid the price. Women can't win in this system. Lose weight, and you're accused of thinking you're too good for your partner. Gain weight, and you're blamed for your partner losing interest. Stay the same, and you're criticized for not taking care of yourself. The target keeps moving, but the underlying message stays constant. Your body is always the problem. Your appearance is always the explanation. Amy Schumer is done with that narrative. She's calling it out explicitly, refusing to participate in it, demanding that we see her divorce as what it actually is, rather than what our cultural obsessions want to make it. And what it actually is, stripped of all the speculation and projection and assumptions, is two people who tried to build a life together and ultimately couldn't make it work. Two people who are handling that reality with grace and maturity. Two parents who are prioritizing their child. Two adults who recognize that love alone isn't always enough to sustain a marriage through all the challenges that life throws at you. There's no villain in this story. No betrayal, no scandal, no dramatic revelation, just the honest acknowledgement that sometimes relationships end, not because anyone did anything wrong, but because the partnership itself isn't sustainable anymore. Chris isn't leaving because he can pull some hot tail, as Amy put it. She isn't leaving because she lost weight and thinks she can bag a basket. In her characteristically blunt phrasing, they're leaving because after 7 years of trying, after navigating autism diagnoses and medical crises and parenthood and career pressures and all the mundane daily challenges that test any marriage, they've reached a point where staying together doesn't serve either of them anymore. That's the real story, not the one that centers Amy's body or Chris's attractiveness or any of the superficial factors that make for easy headlines. The story of two human beings making a difficult choice and trying to do it with as much dignity and kindness as possible. Amy's divorce announcement matters not just because she's a celebrity ending a marriage, but because of how she's doing it. She's refusing to let her body be the story. She's insisting on complexity and nuance in a culture that prefers simple narratives. She's drawing boundaries around her privacy while still being honest with her audience. She's modeling a way of handling public scrutiny that doesn't sacrifice truth or self-respect. And maybe most importantly, she's teaching us something about how we consume celebrity news and how we talk about women's lives. Every time we speculate about a woman's relationship based on her appearance, we're participating in the same reductive thinking that Amy is calling out. Every time we assume that weight loss or weight gain explains life changes, we're reducing complex human experiences to shallow before and after stories. The end of Amy Schumer's marriage to Chris Fischer is significant. 7 years together, a child raised, a life built, and ultimately dismantled. That deserves to be treated with seriousness and respect. But it doesn't need to be explained through the lens of Amy's medical weight loss or Chris's professional success or any other factor that treats their bodies and achievements as more important than their actual relationship dynamics. They tried, they loved each other, they created a family, and now they're moving forward separately, still committed to co-parenting, still treating each other with respect, still refusing to let this ending become ugly or bitter. That's the story, not the weight loss narrative, not the hot chef narrative, not any of the reductive explanations that our culture wants to impose on women's choices, just two people making a hard decision and handling it with as much grace as they can muster. Amy Schumer has always used her platform to challenge the way we think about women's bodies, women's worth, and women's choices. Her divorce announcement is no exception. Even in this painful moment, she's still fighting against the cultural forces that try to reduce women to their appearance, still insisting that her story is more complex than any headline can capture, still demanding that we see her as a full human being rather than a collection of physical attributes and relationship statuses. And in doing that, she's given us all permission to expect better, to demand more nuanced conversations about divorce, about bodies, about the pressures that women face in the public eye, to reject the simple narratives and sit with the uncomfortable complexity of real human lives. December 12, 2024 will be remembered as the day Amy Schumer announced her divorce, but it should also be remembered as the day she refused to let that divorce be defined by anyone's standards but her own. The day she called out the weight loss narrative before it could take hold. The day she insisted that her body, her health journey, and her relationship choices be seen as separate threads in a complex life rather than a simple cause and effect story. Family forever, she wrote. And in those two words, there's a promise that even as the marriage ends, the commitment to their son continues. That even as romantic partnership dissolves, respect and care remain. That endings don't have to be defined by bitterness or blame, and that it's possible to move forward with integrity intact. That's the real revelation in Amy Schumer's divorce announcement. Not what caused the split, but how she's choosing to handle it. With honesty, with boundaries, with a refusal to participate in the narratives that diminish women's agency and complexity. With a commitment to telling her own story on her own terms, even when that story includes pain and failure and the end of something she hoped would last forever. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all, that we get to decide how our stories are told, that we can push back against the narratives that reduce us to our appearance or our relationship status, that we can demand to be seen as whole, complicated, flawed, evolving human beings rather than characters in someone else's story about what women should be and how our lives should unfold. Amy Schumer is ending her marriage, but she's doing it on her terms, with her voice, with her truth, and in a culture that constantly tries to silence women or reduce them to their bodies. That matters more than any speculation about why the relationship ended, because the real story was never about weight loss or attraction, or any of the surface-level explanations. It was always about a woman insisting on her right to define herself, even in the midst of one of life's most difficult transitions. That's what we all suspected about Amy Schumer and Chris Fischer. Not that their marriage was perfect or doomed, but that when it ended, Amy would handle it exactly like this, honestly, defiantly, and entirely on her own terms.